Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to provide you with an update as to what's happening in the Middle East and talk about what the implications of this could be for the global economy, because things are starting to get out of control in the conflict between Israel and Iran. Since I first reported on this, there have been 3 consecutive nights of missile strikes on both sides. Iran has launched hundreds of missiles at Israel. Now, most of those missiles have been intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. But this war is now flaring up, and it's unlikely that we're going to see a resolution at any point in the next few days, because Iran is determined to seek retaliation in response to the airstrikes that were undertaken by Israel recently. And if we have a look at what's going on in the global markets, this chart shows the movement in the price of Brent crude oil over the past 12 months. But if you look at what's been happening recently, since the end of May, we have seen an increase of 18% in oil prices. And in fact, over the past week, they're up by 12%. Now, oil is a really good barometer as to what's going on in the global markets. Usually speaking, if the economy is doing well, if the global economy is thriving, then oil prices will go up because most of the world still uses oil. So basically, if things are going well and everybody is expanding, they'll be using more oil, demand goes up. And as simple economics tells us, when demand goes up, price also goes up because the supply is relatively limited. Now, that's in usual circumstances, but what we've got at the moment are unusual circumstances. The reason why oil prices are going up at the moment is because the oil markets are concerned that the supply of oil may be disrupted, because the Middle East, which is where this conflict is going on, is where a lot of oil is produced, and oil markets are very finely balanced. If you take out even 1% of production, that can send prices go sky high, and that's what's happening at the moment. And what we're seeing over the past 48 hours is that Israel, which initially started off targeting the nuclear development facilities in Iran and also the capital of Tehran, have now started focusing in on oil facilities and gas facilities. So they're now turning this into an economic war where they're targeting where Iran is making money from. And of course, the consequence of attacking oil and gas facilities is that it could lead to a reduction in the global supply of oil and gas, and that's why prices are going up. And if we have a look at what's been going on with the price of gold, which is also a really good barometer as to what's happening in global markets, at times of global fear, when the markets are worried that disruption is happening and stock prices might fall, there is a flight to quality, and gold is seen as a good long-term hold of value. And what we've seen recently is that the price of gold has now spiked to another all-time high. So over the past 12 months, we've seen this movement to the gold markets because we've had a lot of volatility in the global stock markets. We've had the war in Ukraine. We then had lots of conflict in Israel, in the Gaza Strip, and now we've got Israel involved in a wider conflict in the Middle East. So this chart alone is telling us that tension and global fear is rising at the moment. Now, in today's video, I wanted to talk about the logistics and economics of this conflict, because as you can see from this map, Israel and Iran are not neighbours. They're actually located around 1,000 miles away from each other. So unlike most global conflicts, if we look at the war in Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine are neighbours, and the war is going on effectively on the border of where the two countries meet. Russia has obviously pushed back that border, but essentially you've got a landmass where both countries are present. We don't have that in Israel and Iran. So what we're seeing is Iran and Israel are having to send missiles to each other's countries. Now, the initial strikes that were undertaken by Israel were deployed by jets. They flew close to Iranian airspace and then deployed smart missiles, so cruise missiles, those sort of self-guidance missiles that can travel the last few hundred miles on their own with a guidance system. Now, Iran hasn't been doing that. It's been sending long-range ballistic missiles over to Israel. And if we have a look at this map, it shows the other countries in the middle of this. So Israel's on the left, Iran's on the right. And we've got Jordan Saudi Arabia, and Iraq and Syria that are in the strike zone. So basically, the missiles that Iran, and if Israel starts sending missiles from its base, those missiles are traveling over other countries' airspace. And obviously, that raises the risk that if one of those missiles goes astray or it fails and lands before it gets to the destination country, they could start landing in these other countries. So that's why there are concerns rising, not just because Israel and Iran are attacking each other, but also other countries could be drawn into this. And on that point, Iran has made the point just recently that if it finds that the US, the UK, or France is helping to support Israel in the defense or attacks against Iran, then they will take action against those countries. So basically, Iran is threatening the US, the UK, and France that they could also be targets because all three of those countries have military bases in the Middle East. We talked about this in one of my earlier videos, that the reason why the warning signs went up and there was a red alert on the horizon was because Donald Trump started approving the evacuation of non-military personnel from bases, US bases in the Middle East. So that gave us an indication that the intelligence was that there was something going to happen. And in fact, it did happen the following day. So I'll come on to talk about Donald Trump and his response a bit later in the video, because not surprisingly, he's posted on Truth Social about this. So we'll come on to have a look at that in a moment. But I wanted to have a look at the economics of the two countries involved here, how much money they've been investing into defense over the past 5 years. So what we've got here are 2020 through to 2024, which are the figures that are broadly available. The 24 figures are an estimate of what's been spent. And you can see that Israel has been investing heavily into defense, not surprisingly, because it's a relatively small country and it's surrounded by a lot of countries that are not particularly favorable in terms of their ideology. And so Israel has invested over the past 5 years over $143 billion into defense. And you can see in terms of the percentage of Israeli GDP, how much that equates to in each year. In 2020, they invested almost 22 billion, which was 5.3% of GDP. In 2021, it was 5.6%. In 22, 5.2%. In 23, 5.8%. And in 2024, the estimate is that it was 7.3% of GDP. Now, these figures are significantly higher than most other countries. And Israel has a good amount of GDP. It isn't, the percentages aren't elevated here because GDP is small and therefore as a percentage it's gone up. Israel is a wealthy country and it's investing a lot of its GDP, much more than Western countries. It was recently announced in the UK that they wanted to increase their defense spending from 2% to 2.6%. So Israel is more than double that proposed figure in every single one of the last 5 years. If we compare that to what's going on in Iran over the past 5 years, if we start off by looking at the percentage of GDP, you can see it's considerably smaller than Israel's. In 2020, it was 1.8%. In 21, it was 2.3%. 22, 2.7%. 3% in 2023. And then the estimate for 24 is 2.1%. So the figures that we're seeing from Iran are in line with what we're seeing from most countries in the West. It's somewhere around 2%. Donald Trump has said that he wants that increased significantly. He'd like it to get to 5%. And in terms of the total spend on equipment from Iran over the past 5 years, you can see that it was $34.5 billion, which is less than 100 billion less than Israel. Israel has spent almost 110 billion more on defense than Iran has in the last 5 years. And this isn't because Israel was behind the curve, that it was having to catch up. It's just prioritizing defense. It's got one of the best actual defense systems, the Iron Dome system that I talked about earlier, which actually is protecting Israel from missile strikes, is one of the most advanced in the world, if not the most advanced. But it's also got a huge arsenal of jets and missiles and other equipment, much more than Iran. And even though Iran is a bigger country geographically, Israel is far better equipped to take on this war than Iran is. If we have a look at the estimated costs so far to both countries, I think this is quite interesting to see how much war actually costs each nation. It's estimated that since the conflict started, that Israel has launched around 400 ballistic missiles at Israel. Now, the cost of each one of those missiles is somewhere between $3 and $6 million. So, those missiles that Iran has sent so far have an estimated cost of somewhere between $1 and $2.4 billion. That is a lot of money to be spending on missiles. Now, not many of those missiles have actually landed because, as I said, this Iron Dome system that Israel has for shooting down missiles is very sophisticated. So it's estimated that only a handful of those missiles have actually landed in Israel. So most of that 2 billion investment that Iran has spent on those missiles has been wasted. It hasn't actually met what they wanted it to do. And they've also launched between 100 and 150 drones. Now, the estimated cost of those is far lower, between $20,000 and $100,000, but that's still somewhere between $2 and $10 million on those drones. And most of those drones have also been taken out. So, as you can see here, the cost of this war is actually quite high so far, and that's only in 3 days. If this war was to go on for 3 months or a year, you can see what the actual cost would be from Iran's point of view. Now, in terms of what Israel has spent, the estimate on that, if we start off by looking at the defense side of things, because that's actually a larger investment than the missiles that Israel has spent so far. The Iron Dome system, the missiles that it's using in that only have an estimated cost of 50,000. So they're relatively cost efficient compared with the millions that Iran is spending. We just talked about it, that each one of the missiles that Iran is launching costs between $3 and $6 million. And Israel is taking those out with missiles that cost $50,000. So the 200 that it's estimated to have launched so far have an estimated cost of around $10 million. They're also using another system called David Sling or Arrow, and they have a higher unit cost between $1.5 and $3 million. And it's estimated that they've launched 100 of those with a cost of somewhere between 150 and $300 million. So the total cost at the moment in the first 3 days of all the defense missiles is somewhere around 150 to $300 million, which is a lot less than the 2 billion that Iran is expected to have spent on its missiles. Now, in terms of the offensive missiles that Israel has launched into Iran so far, it's estimated that around 150 of those, with an average cost of between $500,000 and $1.5 million. So total expenditure of somewhere between $50 and $200 million. So 200 million on offensive missiles compared with 2 billion from Iran's point of view tells us that Israel has been much more precise. It's going for a much more targeted effort in terms of what it's doing with its missiles. It's launched them from jets rather than from 1,000 miles away from their missile bases. And if you're launching a missile from 1,000 miles away, it's obviously easier to detect that missile and take it out with your defense system than it is if you're launching it from a much closer range. And that's one of the reasons why Israel launched from jets. And also, it's Iran doesn't have the same defense system that Israel has. So in terms of the summary of the costs so far, it's estimated that Iran has spent up to $2.4 billion with an average cost of around $800 million per night. So if this war goes on for a long time, that's the sort of cost that Iran is looking at. Israel has estimated to have spent somewhere between $200 and $500 million, and their estimated cost per night is somewhere between 100 and 170 million. So from a cost-effective point of view, Israel is using its defense weaponry and its missiles more effectively than Iran so far. Iran has been going for a volume approach. It's launching hundreds of missiles, but unfortunately those missiles are not getting through the defense system. And because Israel has this Iron Dome state-of-the-art defense system, it's difficult for Iran to actually fight back in the same way as Israel has attacked Iran. Now, I mentioned earlier that Donald Trump has been making some posts on Truth Social, so I thought I'd share those with you. Now, the first one was this one that said, I gave Iran the chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. Now, that refers to the 5 different meetings that have been held between the USA and Iran in 2025, which obviously haven't led to a signed agreement in terms of agreeing not to continue enriching the uranium, which is what this conflict is all about. The fact that Iran is getting close to having weapons grade uranium that could then be used to make an atomic bomb. He went on to say, I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. Now, we've just seen the clear data on that Israel has got a lot of equipment. It's invested a lot into defense, and its weapons are being used much more effectively and efficiently than Iran's weapons. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they did not know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there is nothing left, and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. So that was what Donald Trump posted on the first day of this conflict. So he's basically saying to Iran, you're going to lose. Israel are much better equipped than you are, so you need to come around the table and sign the deal. Now, since that time, Iran has issued this threat to the US, the UK, and France that if they're seen to be supporting Israel, then they will also be in the firing line. And in response to that, Donald Trump posted, the US had nothing to do with the attack on Iran tonight. If we are attacked in any way, shape, or form by Iran, the full strength and might of the United States Armed Forces will come down on you at levels never seen before. So that is a clear statement in terms of what the USA will do if US bases are hit by Iranian missiles. He went on to say, however, we can easily get a deal done between Iran and Israel and end this bloody conflict. So once again, he's trying to encourage Iran to come around the table, but whether that happens remains to be seen. Now, interestingly, Donald Trump also posted about the fact that he's just had another conversation with President Putin of Russia, so I thought it was worth sharing that with you. It said, President Putin called this morning, that was on June the 14th, to very nicely wish me a happy birthday, but to more importantly talk about Iran, a country he knows very well. We talked at length. Much less time was spent talking about Russia and Ukraine, but that will be for next week. He's doing the planned prisoner swaps. Large numbers of prisoners are being exchanged immediately from both sides. The call lasted approximately 1 hour. He feels, as I do, this war in Israel-Iran should end, to which I explained his war should also end. So, interestingly, what we're hearing there is that President Putin doesn't look to be supporting Iran. He's not looking to escalate this into a wider world war, for example. He's basically saying that it should be brought to an end. And that's an interesting response from him because, as we saw at the beginning of today's video, oil prices are going up as a result of this conflict. And when oil prices go up, that's actually good news for oil producing countries. And I talked about this in previous videos, that the low oil price is actually hurting Russia at the moment. So the fact that oil prices are rising is actually helpful to the Russian economy. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video to provide you with an update as to what's going on in the Middle East. And as we've talked about, unfortunately, things are degenerating. We are starting to see a full-on war developing between Israel and Iran. We've had 3 consecutive nights of missile strikes, and it doesn't look like there's any sort of end in sight. I don't think Iran are ready to come around the table just yet. So I think the most likely outcome over the next few days is that Israel will continue its defense and also its attack on Iran. And it's now started targeting not just those nuclear facilities, but also oil and gas facilities in Iran, which is basically where Iran gets all of its money from. Iran, similar to Russia, is dependent on oil and gas revenue. So if Israel starts to take out some of those facilities, that will hurt the Iranian economy and the Iranian budget. But more importantly, it will also impact on the global supply of oil and gas. And that's going to have a really big impact on oil and gas prices. As we've already seen, oil prices have risen dramatically over the last week. They're up by 12%, which is a major movement. Normally, we would expect movements of maybe 0.5% or 1% in a week, certainly not 12%. And that tells us that the global markets are very concerned about what's happening right now. They're concerned that the supply of oil will reduce, and so that's pushing up oil prices. And also, we could see other countries being drawn into this conflict because Iran may reach out to some of its allies in the Middle East and ask for help. And it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now, Israel, I think, is focused on trying to get those nuclear facilities damaged to put Israel back in terms of their enrichment process, to stop them from getting to the point where they've got enough enriched uranium to make an atomic bomb, because Israel's concerned that Iran would use that atomic bomb on Israel itself. That's the reason why they're attacking the country. So, as it stands at the moment, I can't see any de escalation in this warfare. It doesn't look like either side is ready to back down. In fact, it looks like they're ready to ramp up. And the bigger concern here is that this will develop into a full on war. And if Iran decides that it believes that either the USA, the UK, or France is supporting Israel, which it's already said, then it may decide to attack some of the military bases that those countries have in the Middle East. If that happens, as we've heard from Donald Trump, he's threatening that Iran would see retaliation like never seen before. That would obviously be really bad news for Iran, but it'd also be really bad news for the global economy because it would escalate this war into a wider conflict involving more countries. It would be likely that Iran's oil and gas facilities would be devastated. That would take them out of the global supply. We would see oil prices rising. They could go as high as $100 or more. And that would actually be bad news for the global economy because when oil prices are high, it increases fuel costs and transport costs for most countries and most companies. That will come at a time when we're already seeing rising costs in the USA, the biggest economy in the world, as a result of Donald Trump's tariffs. So we are currently seeing the world on a knife edge here. And if this war in Israel and Iran does escalate and continue, there is a real risk that it could push the global economy into recession at some point towards the end of 2025. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me. If you've bought me a coffee, thank you for that. I see every single one of those messages, so thank you so much to everyone that has bought me a coffee recently. If you bought me YouTube, super thanks. It's exactly the same. I get the same individual messages, so I see all of those. I don't always get time to respond to them, so apologies if I haven't sent you a personal response, but I do see those messages. Thank you so much. And to everyone that's a long-term supporter, either through Patreon, where you can watch these videos advert-free and also get early access to them, YouTube membership, where you'll also get early access, and Buy Me a Coffee membership. Thank you for that long-term support. Really helps to keep me motivated. And here's something to put a smile on your face.